Today's guest is Emmy-winning screenwriter Craig Carlisle, and he's written on tons of animated shows that you'll know: Pete the Cat, Sophia the First, Welcome to the Wayne. And he's here with me today to debunk one of the biggest myths in television writing: that preschool shows are easy or a shortcut into the industry. Well, it's not. And Craig breaks down where that comes from, how he learned to write for the demographic, and why kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. Here we go. All right. This is the Story Series, the podcast for writers who break the rules. Craig Carlisle, welcome.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you. So you are a really prolific Emmy-winning writer. You've written everything from Sophia the First, Welcome to the Wayne, Pete the Cat, and of course the head writer on Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, which is where we met. But as we were talking before we sat down, your career is really spanning mediums. You've worked in film, you've done background as theater. So I would love to talk to you about today debunking a myth that seems to persist in the kids animation space, specifically preschool, which is that it's easy. When we were talking, when we had lunch not too long ago, and we were talking about just what's on our minds in animation, this had come up for you, this subject.
Yeah.
So could you talk about why that was on your mind that day?
Well, it was on my mind because I've had, especially back during the Writers Guild strike, and as we've discussed, I'm a member of the Writers Guild. A lot of writers I knew from the Writers Guild were suddenly reaching out to me like, hey, what do I do to write a kid show? Or, hey, I had Chat GPT. Is it GPT?
Yeah, Chat GPT.
Help me write this outline. What do you think? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to read something you didn't even write, first of all. Second of all, there was even an article I saw online, I think on LinkedIn, that talked about how a great way to break into professional writing is to write kids' TV. And I just immediately was like, well, that's bullshit. I didn't do it till I was past 40. And I got it the old-fashioned way, which was I knew somebody. My oldest friend in the world was the head writer and producer on Bear in the Big Blue House. Andy Hirsch is his name. He's been head writer on countless shows. He's hired me to write on a bunch of shows. I ended up hiring him, just like you, to write on Thomas. And he's like my brother. I've known him since I'm 5 years old. And I found I was good at it, but I was fortunate that he was a good teacher, that he was like, taught me the basic rules of like not modeling behaviors, not writing on the screen, putting up signs or clocks or numbers that the younger viewers will be like, nah, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to watch it. And so when I see people say, well, yeah, it's a good way to break in, I'm like, well, you don't have any idea what goes into it. Because it's a balancing act between trying, first and foremost, story, which is the hardest part of writing. Some people are very good at story. I labor it. I'm good at dialogue and character. I can do those in my sleep. I'm good at fixing other people's stories, which is how I was able to survive as head writer at Thomas and as head at Pete the Cat. Because I'm good at helping shape story. Because I have labored to understand the 3-act structure of an 11-minute pre-K kids TV show, which is really more like a poem because it's so short.
Yeah.
And you can't have fat.
Yeah.
You have to be funny for them, funny for the parents. On Pete the Cat, we got a Proust joke into an episode that I wrote. Later, one of the executives admitted it was because nobody got the joke, that they didn't know what remembrance of things past was. But
that's great.
But it's trying to make it funny on a lot of different levels, without talking down, while keeping a strong story, while keeping the characters consistent, and while my area has always been social literacy.
Well, I want to go to something you said about comparing it to a poem. And I've often thought just in my own head is that like a well-crafted kid script feels like a song. And I think we're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
where there's a rhythm to it. And I'm not musically minded. I know you are. You wrote tons of songs on Thomas, and I thank you for that, because some of my episodes had songs. But it does feel like that. There's a rhythm, there's a pacing to it.
Mhm.
And I think it's deceptively simple. You think if you well, I was a kid, I know how to write kids, whatever, it's not much to it, but that's not true. It reminded me of, in the '90s, there was the comedian to sitcom boom. And so people thought the best way to get a sitcom was to become a stand-up comedian, and because they saw famous examples like
Yeah.
Seinfeld and Tim Allen and Roseanne, countless others. But that meant that they were getting into, some of them anyway, getting into stand-up comedy inauthentically, right?
Yeah.
To just as a means to get around, and that's kind of what we're saying here,
Yeah.
where the view of preschool can be, well, I'm just going to get in this way, and then I'll really be in once I.
Yeah, and it's like a bridge to nowhere, because if you're thinking writing kids animation is like, cut to, I'm writing for Modern Family, you're just like delusional, because we operate in this world that a lot of show business doesn't care about. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that to diminish what we do. I think it's their failing, not ours, because everybody relies on us. Shows that I've written just songs for that track, because I have like 180 some songs now that I've helped write between Pete the Cat, Sophia the First, and Thomas, and a couple other little things here and there. But those are playing any given quarter in like 45 different countries. So we have reach. We reach into the homes all over the world. I often will reconnect with people I grew up with, and they're like, wait, what do you do? My grandkid loves Pete the Cat.
Yeah.
Not the people I went to high school with, grandkids, which they do somehow. I'm still 28 in my head, but I feel like it's a disservice to everything about what we do.
Yeah.
Because they see it as a stepping stone to something else, which is already a mistake, because you're not going to do it well. When I started doing it, I saw it as a job. My first show was a show called Word World, which was a PBS show that Andy Yerkes was head writer for. I did one, literally him saying, if it sucks, I'll rewrite it. You'll still get paid, but I'm not going to give you more. And it went well, so I did a bunch of those.
Yeah.
And Mama Mirabelle's Home Movies for Andy, and Jungle Junction for Andy.
You found that you had a knack for it.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised yourself maybe a little bit.
Absolutely surprised myself.
So what about your background do you think translated well into preschool? I have to think that theater
Absolutely helped. I had helped develop over the years a couple of children's theater things, which I never considered my wheelhouse. I was more like... spectacle is what I did best. Like, I did a play off Broadway about basketball where we had full court basketball on stage.
Wow.
It's called Joe Fearless at the Atlantic Theater in New York. It was a big hit because it was such a unique piece. There was nothing else like it. And, but doing the kids' theater, you really learn about and can watch happening how parents react to it. And the idea of finding that sweet spot, I think the primary teaching tool I had for kids TV, aside from Andy Yerkes, was Merry Melodies. Like, I grew up watching the early Bugs Bunny on reruns. I grew up in Indiana, but like the industrial Northwest corner, so Chicagoland it was called. And so I grew up watching all of the old Bugs Bunny, Sylvester, Tweety, you name them, Foghorn Leghorn. And the way those would work on so many different levels, that they were funny to me as a kid, and then later when I saw them and Bugs is in drag and kissing Elmer Fudd on the mouth, and how hilarious that seemed as a kid. And, obviously in this day and age, it would be scandalous to a certain part of the viewership. But I feel like that's the place I came from, of trying to make it entertaining while also hitting an emotional mark. Now, with Word World, it was educational because all of the animals, like the cat, was CAT. So it was about teaching kids to identify letters and put words together. So, like, if it snowed, we would have clouds shaped like SNOW that would come together and then snow would fall. It was an incredibly clever device. Um, but learning to write for that show, uh, I realized how hard this is and what a science it is. And that's part of what makes it interesting. Once you have the story, it's like, how far can I push this without crossing over into an older audience, making jokes the kids will never get and that the
Right.
adults won't find funny, because 6 to 11, like Welcome to the Wayne, was 6 to 11. So we could write a slacker vampire and
Yeah.
characters like that that wouldn't make sense to a younger kid.
Right.
But with like Pete the Cat, we could just take our time.
Mm.
And the other thing that was important, I think, and it might have been your episode.
Mm.
You had a song,
Yep.
Chasing.
Yes. Chasing Rainbows.
Yeah. That was the first song that I gave feedback on as head writer. And I was like, the lyrics are really strong, but the music department had done a tinkly little kid song. And I was like, I had just come off Pete the Cat, where we had our characters were played by like Elvis Costello and Diana Krall and Dave Matthews and Katie Tunstall, and Dave Davies of the Kinks played Pete's grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Wild.
was bonkers. The people we had, Jessica Biel, Phil Lamar, Allison Stoner, all of these huge talents. And so we were creating pop songs for kids. We would write them with Swampy, who helped write a lot of the songs for Phineas and Ferb, obviously. Yeah. And we would just sit in his office, and Tom Freund or Katie Tunstall would come in, and we would just make up these songs. And so when I heard what I thought were really strong lyrics put to, plinka plinka, kids are dumb kind of music, I was like, you have to throw it out. And at first Mattel was like, well, we already paid him. And I'm like, well, I don't, if the script didn't work, I would have to rewrite it till it was done. You wouldn't pay me extra for that.
Yes.
So let's have the same standard for the music, which they did, to their credit. And the music department, the woman I ended up working, Laura Nikolic, is a genius. And she fixed this song and made it much more like a pop song for kids.
And so back to that moment where you were kind of breaking into kids animation, you're in your 40s. So by then you're already a very seasoned, experienced writer.
Yeah.
So you know how to kind of, imagining like this, like a soundboard, you know what to kind of turn up within yourself and turn down in terms of how to write towards a specific audience.
Right.
So that part of you just experience helped get your writing kind of dialed in for kids, your theater background. You had a very musical sensibility too. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I studied, like I played the trumpet for 12 years as a kid and performed like in recitals and stuff like that, and won medals, all the stuff you do when you're a kid, in those horribly stressful standing up in front of a group with my horn.
I did that. I didn't win any medals though.
Well, it was hard not to win a medal. I mean, the fact I got gold medals was the good part, but it basically, you could suck and they'd be like, give you a tin medal or something.
Right.
But I think writing for different shows, part of my skill set was just, I can see the show, I can read scripts, and I can mimic the tone. That's not easy to do. That's just something I happen to be good at. And I feel like, again, going back to the people who are like, oh, well, maybe I'll just do kids TV. I'm just like, you look at the people who are good at it, and you've spoken to a lot of them, like Peter Gaffney or Emily Brundage.
Yes.
So talented. I don't know her. I just know her work. And I'm just like, so good out there cutting her own path.
Yes.
And that's heavy shit. That's hard to do. I feel like the best writers, like you, like Andy, like Matt Hoverman is somebody I've worked with a ton and did theater with, actually, before we realized that we were both kids writers. I was acting in his play.
Yeah.
And we just had the discussion of what do you do during the day? And we were both writing for Arthur. And then we ended up winning an Emmy together. And when Disney needed someone else on Sophia the First, my wife was like, what about Matt? And I'm like, oh, yeah, what about Matt? You guys met Matt. And they hired him right away. And
Nice.
he ended up being Office Mates, which was a horrible sitcom unto itself.
That's great.
But he's a theater guy. And
Yeah.
he's the kind of guy you can put any show in front of me, can watch it and be like, yeah, I can make it sound like that. Which I think has to do with, it's just like dialogue. You can either write it or you can't.
Yeah.
You can learn how to develop character. You can learn how to get better at dialogue. But, you know, if you can do it, you can do it. If you have a tin ear, you have a tin ear, right? And I feel like that is in the category of adapting to all the different shows we do, which again, you know, when I was working on Word World, one of the things Andy hired me to do was a mutual friend of ours who was a gifted playwright, gifted screenwriter, had a deal in Hollywood, like so talented, such a lovely guy. He gave him a kids episode and he couldn't do it. It was just too adult. It was very funny what he wrote, but it was not kids TV. So they hired me to fix it, to make it a kid show. And which is a perfect example of this guy is a brilliant writer and he just couldn't adapt to the strictures. I think the main things that the theater taught me, aside from adaptability, were story, you know, and the more I did kids stuff, you realize the kids have a huge bullshit meter when it comes to story. If the story doesn't make sense, they just turn away. And, you know, part of the struggle is, have you ever watched a test thing?
Yeah.
They have the kids.
The storybook testing.
Yeah.
It happens a lot at Disney.
Yeah. Yeah. They did it for Hey AJ.
Okay.
And we were watching it, and there was like a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a couple of 6-year-olds. And it was literally like the 6-year-olds were explaining stuff to the 4-year-olds, and the 3-year-old looked like he was high the whole time. He was just like, like,
yeah.
So trying to land on what is really 4 different age groups.
Oh, light years difference.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A 4-year-old has 33% more life experience than a 3-year-old. A 6-year-old has 100%. So it seems like they're close in age, but they are not.
No. And there are ranges of preschool, younger preschool, older preschool. In one of those testings, so one of the first ones I went to was for my episode, and now it's all virtual. But years ago, I drove to San Dimas, so it was like an hour. But I was like so happy because I was a script coordinator. It was an episode I wrote, so I went out there. And then one of the kids said, he just goes, while they were reading my episode, he goes, "This is taking forever." I said, "Oh my God, you know, you work so hard to get like breadcrumbs and in
the throat."
Right. But it was a good reminder of, well, that's your audience.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
No.
And so figure it out, but their reactions are genuine. That's why they get tested, and there's things to learn. It's not a perfect process, but it was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah. And so you think, so part of that is, that's interesting, the idea of adaptability that can sometimes stop writers from kind of crossing, not genres, but age groups when it comes to writing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, you know, and there's a lot, even within animation, there is hesitation for those of us who, you know, because between Thomas and Pete the Cat, I was head writer of over 200 episodes of Bridge, or Pre-K Plus, as we used to call it.
Yep.
And they don't, the opportunities for me to write 6 to 11 are limited. And like my agents will submit a Word Girl I wrote, which is funny, or Welcome to the Wayne is funny. We were Emmy nominated for that. By the time we were nominated, they'd canceled the show. But, you know, brilliant.
That's the animation timeline for you.
Yeah. Billy Lopez, who created that, is such a talent. But they're hesitant even because, you know, And the flip side is it also goes the other way because there are many more restrictions on us in the pre-K space.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this brings you to the subject of creative restrictions
Yeah.
and just reframing how one views that. I like to think of like every show that I'm on, I like to draw a box around the show. It's a sandbox. And it's like, and you alluded to this earlier, but the idea of pushing as far as you can while you're on a show to see where the boundaries are. And every preschool show is different that
Right.
way. And so, but I find there's fun in that. I don't look at the creative restrictions as like, okay, well, we can't do anything. It's like, no, what can we do? And then try to push that as much as possible. Do you have a similar kind of way of looking at it?
Years ago, my the first director I was close to was actually my first wife. And her sort of philosophy was similar to what you're saying. If you say to a kid, just go outside and play, they'll just go stand in the yard and try to figure out what to do. But if you're like, you can go to the backyard, you can play on the jungle gym, you can use this, here's something to play with. If you give them some structure to the play, they'll go crazy and spend the day.
That's so true.
And I sort of take that into kids' TV I'm like, okay, I'm not just going to do it's Pete the cat. It's like, well, what are our limitations? What are the things? Pete's only going to have one line in every episode. So what's that line going to be? What is the simple description? The thing I always go back to is something I learned when I was first studying playwriting.
Playwright and playwriting are two different things.
One was ITING, was the idea that every play can be boiled down to this is the story of X who sets out to do Y and succeeds or fails. And I do that for every episode of kids' TV I do. This is the story of Hamlet who sets out to avenge his father and ultimately succeeds. That's the story. The fact that he kills a couple of his friends, his girlfriend commits suicide, he kills his uncle, he kills his uncle's best friend, he kills his best friend's dad, he dies himself. Those are all, sorry for the spoiler alert, or lack of it, but all of that falls as those are ornaments on the Christmas tree.
Right.
It's the story of Hamlet who sets out to avenge his father and succeeds.
That North Star.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you then, across mediums, what habits are you carrying over from one to the next? It sounds like finding that North Star is one. That one sentence, here's what it is, and doing your best not to deviate. Anything else that you bring with you as you?
I bring the thing that I first learned when the first film I ever wrote. I was actually hired by Edward Burns to write a movie.
Whoa, cool.
He came and saw a play that I had written that was in Los Angeles that got a little attention. And he was there just because my lead actor, Michael Campbell, was longtime friends with Heather Graham, who was Ed's girlfriend at the time. So he went with her to see the play. Then he sent Aaron Lubin, who ran Marlboro Road Gang, which was Eddie's company. And they hired me to write this story that they had, this idea. It never got made, but he's a great guy. And he taught me, he knows so much because he was a cameraman originally. He knows everything about filmmaking. And so what he told me was, you got to focus on the outline. And which, in plays, you don't really write an outline. You just start writing the dialogue. Theater is about, you might want to structure it. You may write a synopsis for yourself, but outline was never a thing. And I studied with like Terrence McNally, who was an iconic American playwright. He never talked about outlines. He talked about character and story and all that, but never about an outline. So I was like really learning how to craft an outline with Eddie, because then once you have a strong outline, dialoguing it is just, I can do that in a few hours. I can do an 11-minute episode because it's just typing if you have a strong outline. And that was something I carried over from when I learned about film to now. That's where I'll beat the shit out of a writer when we're developing, is getting a really tight outline, because once you have that, script is easy.
Mm.
So that's something I carried over.
Have you ever dealt with the fear of being pigeonholed?
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
have
yeah.
do you feel like you have been just at different points in your career?
Yeah, it's, I think the advantage of coming to it later in life is I have an enormous ego, but I don't have an ego about this stuff. I'm not precious about it.
Mm.
If I think someone is being a jerk, I'll say so. I don't respond well to being condescended to, because I'm a pretty bright guy and I don't condescend to the people I work with. So I don't do well with that. But by and large, I came to it late enough, and, it was so choppy at first that when I was writing the episodes of Arthur that won me an Emmy, during the day I was doing drywall work at a museum in Harlem, because my wife had supported me for a few years with me filling in with freelance work or a directing gig. But most of the bills, she was a spinning instructor and a union bartender, which is a thing in New York, and a very lucrative thing at that. But so she was doing that and supporting us, because she was like, I feel like you're going to get your leg over the wall for animation. Let me do this, you do that.
Mm.
She's the best. And this job fell into my lap. A friend's mother was the American Academy of Arts and Letters. A friend's mom ran it. And my friend, who had been my roommate, was like, didn't you do construction at some point? And I was like, well, I did some, but construction management was one of my day jobs. And I knew how to do drywall work. So I went and refinished an old storage room into a new gallery for them. Right.
Mm.
And while I was doing that during the day, I was writing Arthur when I would get home at night. And then once we won an Emmy, that's changed everything. That's when I got Sophia the First. And by that point, I was 50. So when I finally dipped my toe into the river of money that was, like that first staff check where you're like, I get this every week.
Right.
I did not fear pigeonholing, because, I had done pretty well as a director, and I made a living as an artist for a number of years.
Yeah.
And I directed a lot of stuff. Actually, HBO used to have a theater, and I directed a lot of stuff for them, and at the Comedy Festival in Aspen.
Yeah.
I had my moments. I had a couple good reviews in the Times at La
Yeah.
Mama and off Broadway. And, I had my moments there without ever getting over the wall. So when I was finally over the wall, I was just like, I let go of my ego sense of what success would look like for me,
Mm.
and instead was just grateful to be at the
I love
party.
that. So it's in some ways a late success
Oh, yeah.
maybe helped you have a stronger identity. So you know who you were, how you wanted to be defined, and you weren't worried about, oh gosh, is this what I'm, I mean, I feel like people, the pigeonhole issue is something that a lot of up and coming writers think about.
Yeah.
And I like to say, get pigeonholed as someone who makes money doing something.
Yeah.
Get that problem and then figure it out.
Yeah. The place where I say, because the thing now, I have a couple people I mentor a bit, and because I try to be, if someone who's young in animation reaches out to me, I respond, because I try to be the person I didn't have anywhere. When I moved to New York to go to NYU, I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know how the professional theater worked beyond having worked summer stock for a few years. So I don't mind if a young person is like, hey, do you do this or that? I'm happy to do that.
Right.
Uh, I also am very much a late bloomer. And so, I don't have expensive taste. I don't have, because I never had money
Yeah.
until the last decade. You know what I mean? So my sense of being pigeonholed with young people, I'm like, don't get pigeonholed as something you don't want to do. it's fine to be a script coordinator. And like we had a weird thing at Mattel where they didn't want me to give scripts to like the script coordinators. And I'm just like, I don't even, and it wasn't my executives doing it. It was Mattel policy because I was working for Monica Dennis, who's fantastic.
Right.
And she would have been happy. And like, I gave a couple scripts to one who had left, but like there were very talented people I would have hired in a minute to get their first script.
I wouldn't have a career if I wasn't allowed to get freelance scripts as a coordinator.
Yeah.
'Cause that's how I grew.
Yes. It's gotta feel like, because then also you're making it a dead end job that people are going to leave.
Right.
Rather than saying elevate, and then we'll bring the next person in and elevate.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone who does want to kind of cross mediums, but actually wants to get into kids animation?
Find a show you like. Don't try to write that show, because Bluey is lightning in a bottle. How many meetings have you had where they're like, we're looking for the next Bluey, or now it's the next K-pop?
Demon Hunters.
Yeah.
I've been in so many meetings that now they say, if we hear someone say, this is the next Bluey, we don't believe, because everybody, but you're right.
You can't.
No.
You can't. You know, a million years ago, I read the Moss Hart book, Act One, which was about theater in the 1920s when he was a young man. And his thing was, you can't copy what works, but you can learn from what doesn't. So I would say find a show you like so you can see what works, and then watch a bunch of shows to see what doesn't work for you. Because there are shows that if you watch them, they're just too slow, or they're too babyish, or they're sort of like the original Cocomelon and
Right.
those shorts.
Well, yeah, and you couldn't write something like that. You have to make it, and then it's the proof of concept, but you can't write that because no one would.
No, and it doesn't, even the finished product, a segment of the viewership is going to be like, no, thank you. Whereas another section of the viewership is slavishly devoted to it, and then it becomes something better when, you turn it into an actual story, right?
Right.
So I would say, first of all, find the show you like and learn how they do it. Also with Bluey, it's tough because one guy wrote all of them, right?
Yeah.
So that's a difficult thing. But sort of immerse yourself in it a little bit. Immerse yourself into the idea. I think I sounded drunk for a second, but immerse yourself in the idea of structure. Like I said, this is the story of A who sets out to do B and succeeds or fails. Also to be like Act One, the story starts. Bottom of Act Two, Dark Night of the Soul. Seems like you're never going to get it. Act Three is the resolution. What's your midpoint? Learn the technicals.
Yes.
And just keep trying.
Yeah. I think that surprises people that there is structure to kids TV. We use the hero's journey all the time. I mean, on the board, we literally have low point or escalation. It's all by act. I mean, that is a real thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is one thing that surprises people is that, there's a structure. There's you can apply the hero's journey. It's like, yes, whether it's 7 minutes, 11 minutes, you can do that.
Well, and it's not just that you can do it. For kids, you must.
Yeah.
Because they want to be told the story. That's human nature. David Mamet, who now is like an arch conservative, so I don't really...
It's a wild transformation.
Right? I can't gig with him anymore, but when I was coming up, he was playwriting God.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And he said a very interesting thing, because like Truffaut apparently said all French films have a beginning, middle, and end, just not necessarily in that order. And Mamet's response was like, that's why so many French films are fucking boring. Right? And I agree with that. In the kid space, it's going to be boring to them if they're not following the hero's journey, right? Whatever that is. So I feel like learning that structure, learning whether it's that way, whether it's even Save the Cat, and following the precepts of a book like that, it's just a matter of, sticking with it and not being afraid, if you're young, to take a script coordinator position or a production associate position where you can learn the business.
Craig, before we go, I want to go out with a question that I like to ask everybody, which is, what is a rule in our industry that you believe is worth breaking?
this is sort of a slightly esoteric rule, and it depends on the place, but flashbacks.
Ooh.
That lots of places, like when I was at Amazon, they were like, you can't do flashbacks. Kids don't understand them. And so I think the bigger thing I would say is kids are not as stupid as studios and or executives and maybe particularly educational advisors like to think they are. My mom, may she rest in peace, was an elementary educator, teacher. Both of my grandmothers were elementary school teachers, public school teachers, all. A lot of my cousins are public school teachers. It's a thing in my family. So I used to send my mom my scripts and the notes from educational advisors. And she was just like, your educational advisor needs to write in sentences that make sense. Like, she was so hard on this education advisor, who I actually like as a person, but a well-known education advisor. But it was just this treating children like they're stupid. But the main thing, if it's going to be specific, saying you can't have thought bubbles, you can't have flashbacks, a lot of studios don't like to do that because they say kids don't understand it, and kids understand it. They think it's funny if you do the wavy line thing and go back into the past and they have a animated different hairstyle or something. It's
right.
So I would say, I mean, does that answer it?
Yeah. I think that it's not even that kids need to know this is in the past. It's that if they're still gripped by what they're seeing, that they don't need to understand it 100%, right? Like,
Yeah.
but the idea of a flashback, but as long as they're still following it, then that's enough, right?
Yes. And, Swampy always used to say, if there was a question where, is this too smart for the kids, or is this a word they won't know? His thing was, let them ask.
Right.
Challenge the kids to ask their parents. And the parents then become part of it. And if you're writing something that's funny that the parents don't mind watching, then it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
That the kids want to watch it even more because it's something they can do with their parents. And I feel like, the bigger thing, the bigger rule is this constant belief that kids won't understand things. And the specific thing is flashbacks, thought bubbles, devices like that. That kids, with, hey, AJ, she goes on pretend adventures. And we would do occasional pop-outs where they're crawling through the jungle, and then you pop out to her and her dad crawling under the dining room table.
Yeah.
And then just to remind you, this is pretend. And kids got it. Kids followed it. And there was a question, well, will they follow that? And I think most of the writers were like, well, I would have, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt like, watching Scooby-Doo, I didn't know what was going on,
Well, my daughter, just yesterday, she's not even 3. She took part of her play area and turned it like sideways and put her animals inside and said it was a hospital. So because she was watching doctor things, right? She likes this, so she wanted to take care of her animals, and she said it's a hospital. She doesn't. I mean, that's an example of like going in and out of, like, if you were a show, you would show a kid doing that, and then you would cut to like a real hospital. She would be pretending to be. She's seeing a real hospital, but she knows it's make believe. So to your point about cutting in and out, a jungle versus crawling on the, yes, kids will understand. They do it daily.
As a kid, I had the luxury of growing up with like 5 television stations,
right,
and no internet and no cell phones. And so we would go outside. I mean, it's horrible now, and play guns. That's called play war with sticks.
Right.
Literally, it makes it sound like we were hillbillies when I was growing up.
I would do that. You just call it guns. Let's play guns. Yeah,
let's play guns. Or we would play haunted house on my friend's front porch.
Yeah.
And we believed it.
Yeah.
We never thought we weren't on Jeff Rogers' front porch, but we believed it. And we would just keep adding to the story. And I feel like, part of the reason Bluey is so successful is it's a father who is playing with his kids like a kid.
Yeah.
And that, to me, also There's very adult humor in some of those episodes.
Yes.
Of like the toilet seat you can't lift, so he's out relieving himself in the backyard and saying hello to a neighbor while he's doing it. That's funny, but it's just off screen.
Yeah.
So the kids know what's happening. They understand.
Yeah.
And he never stops to think, oh, what if the kids don't get this? It's just not his worry.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, is the rule that I would always break. Don't assume kids are dumb. It's different if you're talking about modeling behavior. Like, don't show somebody jumping off the garage.
Right. You don't want to give them too many ideas like that.
You don't want to, I'm trying to think, it just flashed through my head something that they were afraid a kid was going to model a behavior, but it was like during a fantasy when they were on a spaceship. And I was just like, you mean when they're in zero gravity, kids are going to, what?
Yeah.
So there are limits to that. But those things I get. The not putting up numbers on the screen unless there's a specific explanation of the numbers or words or any of that, I get it. But the idea that kids won't understand something, look at shows like Bluey, the ones that ask them for more, ask them to go with it.
Craig, this was such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If you want more episodes like this, make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. And while you're at it, grab my free guide, The Rule Breaker's Guide to Finding Your Creative Voice. It's a brutally honest roadmap I put together, built from the lessons, mistakes, and breakthroughs I've collected along my journey as a writer. You can download it for free at storyseriespodcast.com. See you in the next one.